All right, so we're going to start into the core stratagems that are in the rule book for 10th edition. These are going to be generic, so everyone has access to them. And we're going to start with a couple of them in this first video that are going to have a pretty big impact as far as the way this edition is going to play out. We're going to see these being used quite a bit. So for the first one, we have Insane Bravery. So we've seen a stratagem like this throughout most editions, but a bit of a change to it. It's a little more forgiving. So it's during your command phase after failed a battle shock test, which is a really big deal. So it's not like before where you had to, oh, they're probably going to fail, so I'm going to use it before. Now we can use it after we fail, which means that we're not wasting our command points on, but I could have passed that with a good roll. Anyway, so when you target a friendly unit that has failed a battle shock test, there is an exception here, basically saying that you can target it even though it failed a battle shock test, because after it fails, it can't be targeted with stratagems. But this is immediately after, so you can't like roll all of your decide who you're targeting as you roll them one at a time. As soon as you fail, that's when you have to decide. So that's when you stratagem and decide that it actually passes. And then the effect is basically it counts as having passed, so it doesn't suffer any of the effects of failing battle shock. It just counts as if it passed the whole time. All right, moving on to Fire Overwatch. So for this one, again, we've stratagem 9th edition. However, it does have quite a few changes here. So you're going to be able to use stratagem in your opponent's movement phase or charge phase, which is a big change because we use it in their movement phase now. So after an enemy unit is set up, starts, or ends a normal move, advance, fallback, or charge move. That's all about phase other than the charge move. So anytime that someone starts or ends a move, you could potentially use this stratagem. When you do, a friendly unit within 24 inches of the enemy unit that performed that particular action or movement will be able to shoot as if it was your shooting phase. Now, one of the big things to note here is that it's as if in your shooting phase. So they will get benefits if you have an attached character. However, if you have characters that have auras or like at the beginning of the shooting phase, choose a unit and something happens, that sort of ability, that won't happen because you haven't actually got to your shooting phase. You're interrupting your opponent's movement or charge phase. The restrictions, as per normal Overwatch, whenever you fire Overwatch, it's only on modified 6's hit instead of your normal ballistic skill. And it specifically calls out that you ignore the modifier. So, unlike normal stratagems, which can only be used once per phase, this one also calls out that if you turn. So, if you use it in your opponent's movement phase, then your opponent knows that you can't use this in their charge phase. So they may feel a little safer or bolder when they're deciding who they're going to charge. Now, one of the things that we have to keep in mind with this is we have to be a little careful because it says start or end a normal move, advance, or fallback. So there are times where we're going to have this kind of weird interruption of you're going through your movement phase and your opponent kind of has to be paying attention during that movement phase, because if they decide to fire Overwatch at a unit that's going to, let's say, normal move, well, they need to decide if they're going to do that before you actually move the unit. They can't necessarily wait and say, oh, now that I see where you're ending up, you're hidden behind cover, I'm going to actually shoot at them when they started their move. Now, obviously, we're pretty quick about going through our turns, so when you're moving stuff in the movement phase, you may kind of telegraph by moving the first model in a specific direction, and that's fairly easy to say, oh, sorry, before you move, I want to fire Overwatch, and I think that's pretty fair. That being said, this is when the unit starts or ends its move, so this shouldn't be used as one of those things to where you move everything, you set up, and then at the end of your movement phase, your opponent says, oh, by the way, when that unit which was like the second unit moved, I'm going to fire Overwatch at them when they end their move. It is pretty specific in the wording in the actual rulebook about when they start or when they end, or the unit specifically starts or ends it. So they'll kind of have to stay on the ball and pay attention to, which applies to us as well, obviously. Opponent's movement phase, we will have to be paying in order to appropriately time this stratagem. So yeah, there are going to be things with it because it says start or ends a fallback. Obviously, there's certain things with like big guns never tire. If I could actually shoot at the unit before it falls back, but I would take a penalty there because we're only hitting on unmodified sixes. The penalty doesn't really exist, but also I'm only hitting sixes. So maybe there's times where that actually us because again they could fall back behind cover or out of line of sight of the that we actually want to shoot. But yeah, those are two of our bigger stratagems. You're doing more of these over several of the stratagems, all of them by the time we're done, at least in the core rulebook. And yeah,